It's so hot outside. I hate the hot weather. I'm going to hide in this house forever. What's up, guys? My name is Moo. I am a college student who loves reading, and I'm here to share that love with all of you. If you like my content, make sure to like the video, comment down below your favorite nonfiction book. Did I do that already? I don't think so. Maybe I did, but comment down below your favorite nonfiction book. And if you like the content I put out, make sure to subscribe. I upload every Thursday, so there will be a new video every week for you. Today, we are going to be doing a video that my mom requested a couple times. Many of my family members have read this book. I was the one that introduced them to this book, and they all loved it. I love it. I read it for school in my junior year of high school, but I'm coming back and bringing it back to you guys so that you can hear it too. And I am very excited to tell you about it. It is called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. This is a nonfiction book about a real woman named Henrietta Lacks, who we will be hearing about in this story. I found this story quite remarkable when I first read it, and I find it quite remarkable to this day. And I am so excited to show some of you the life of Henrietta Lacks. So let's kick off by reading the summary. Her name was Henrietta Lacks, but scientists know her as HeLa. She was a poor southern tobacco farmer who worked the same land as her slave ancestors, yet her cells, taken without her knowledge, became one of the most important tools in medicine. The first immortal human cells grown in culture, they are still alive today, though she has been dead for more than 60 years. If you could pile all HeLa cells ever grown onto a scale, they'd weigh more than 50 million metric tons, as much as 100 Empire State Buildings. HeLa cells were vital for developing the polio vaccine, uncovered secrets of cancer, viruses, and the atom bomb's effects, helped lead important advances like in vitro fertilization, cloning, and gene mapping, and have been bought and sold by the billions. Yet Henrietta Lacks remains virtually unknown, buried in an unmarked grave. Now Rebecca Skloot takes us on an extraordinary journey from the colored ward of Johns Hopkins Hospital in the 1950s to stark white laboratories with freezers full of HeLa cells, from Henrietta's small, dying hometown of Clover, Virginia, a land of wooden slave quarters, faith healings, and voodoo, to East Baltimore today, where her children and grandchildren live and struggle with the legacy of her cells. Henrietta's family did not learn of her immortality until more than 20 years after her death, when scientists investigating HeLa began using her husband and children in research without informed consent. And though the cells had launched a multi-million-dollar industry that sells human biological materials, her family never saw any of the profits. As Rebecca Skloot so brilliantly shows, the story of the Lacks family, past and present, is inextricably connected to the dark history of experimentation on African Americans, the birth of bioethics, and the legal battles over whether we control the stuff we are made of. Over the decade it took to uncover this story, Rebecca came enmeshed in the lives of the Lacks family, especially Henrietta's daughter, Deborah, who was devastated to learn about her mother's cells. Deborah was consumed with questions. Had scientists cloned her mother? Had they killed her to harvest her cells? And if her mother was so important to medicine, why couldn't her children afford health insurance? Intimate in feeling, astonishing in scope, and impossible to put down, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks captures the beauty and drama of scientific discovery as well as its human consequences. That was a long one, but it gave us a lot of vital information. So I will first talk about Henrietta Lacks and her life, and then her daughter Deborah, who is the main family member that Rebecca Skloot talks to, because Rebecca Skloot talks about her own experience within this novel and her mission to help that family find answers. And then I'll talk a little bit about the contributions that Henrietta Lacks' cells led to science and the ethics of it all. So first up is Henrietta Lacks. Henrietta Lacks grew up in Virginia, and she married her cousin because they were in a very uneducated part of the country and they didn't have access to much health care, too much science information, to really any sort of information. Most people in that town did not even have a high school education. Many of them dropped out in middle school or even before that. and Henrietta and her husband were two of those people. When Henrietta was in her 30s, she developed cervical cancer. It is those cells, those cancerous cells that multiplied, that became HeLa, which are the cells from her that are still used to this very day. There are many aspects of Henrietta's life that are quite unknown, and if you want a more in-depth talk about it, you should watch Bailey Sarian's video, which I will link down below. I told her to do Henrietta Lacks, and I don't know if she ever saw my message, but I messaged her, and then she did a video on Henrietta Lacks. So, you know what? I'm gonna say that I inspired it. Henrietta Lacks, in the grand scheme of things, is a pretty virtually unknown character. Even with the information that her family had, her part in history is very undocumented, which is such a shame because she did so much for science without even knowing it. In fact, she died without knowing what she had ever done. Back in the 1950s, when she had these cells extracted, the doctors didn't have to ask for consent to use her cells. Especially since she was a Black woman, doctors did not treat her with any sort of level of respect, so they took her cells without asking her. She had intense radiation that severely mangled her body, and she just continued to decline until she unfortunately passed away because of her cancer. And that's pretty much the life of Henrietta Lacks as we know it. Again, there's more details that you can definitely learn about in different videos, but that's mostly her life. Now, Rebecca Skloot became informed about Henrietta Lacks in the 90s when she was in college, and from that day forward, she was invested on learning who Henrietta Lacks was, because it was not really anywhere in the textbook. In fact, in a lot of instances, her name was recorded as Helen Lane. Virtually no one knew about this woman, so Rebecca Skloot wanted to change that, and she called up many of Henrietta Lacks' family members. At first, they definitely didn't want to talk to her because they had terrible experiences in the past with researchers and journalists who wanted things from them and gave them nothing in return. And they were sick of hearing those phone calls. They didn't want to talk to anybody, but Skloot was patient and she was persistent in a way that wasn't rude or pushy. She just tried her best to show the family how much it meant to her that answers got found and how much she wanted to help the family. So finally, Deborah begins to open up, and the two go on this long journey finding answers about what happened to her mother's cells, to Henrietta Lacks as a person, and even more than that. Deborah and Rebecca Skloot form a deep friendship by the end of this decade-long journey, and it's really sweet to see, but it was definitely rocky. For example, as much as Rebecca Skloot helped Deborah Lacks, Deborah still didn't let her look at files for a very long time. Deborah, like her mother, was very uneducated in a lot of senses. The town that they grew up in really was not a place where it was easy to learn, and Deborah still spoke with this distinct dialect and was quite uneducated in the long run, but she wanted to know everything. She wanted to learn. It wasn't for lack of trying, it was just where she grew up and when she grew up. And there were all these external factors that contributed to it. One thing that I really like about this book is Rebecca Skloot recorded a lot of the conversations she had with the family members of Henrietta Lacks, and they all had their distinct speech patterns, and those speech patterns were shown through this book. Rebecca Skloot says in the first page, "I've done my best to capture the language with which each person spoke and wrote. Dialogue appears in native dialects. Passages from diaries and other personal writings are quoted exactly as written. As one of Henrietta's relatives said to me, if you pretty up how people spoke and change the things they said, that's dishonest. It's taking away their lives and their experiences and their selves. So the dialects in these written words are very distinct. You can hear it in your head as it's written on the paper. That was created to respect all of those involved. Rebecca Skloot did everything she could to respect this family because they had been so wronged by so many people. Now, onto the actual medical benefits that these cells created. As it said in the summary, a lot of things were created with the help of these cells. The polio vaccine, for one, IVF, multiple cancer treatments. Her cells regenerate at a crazy pace, and they aren't as sensitive as other cells taken, so they can multiply in a slightly more diverse range of temperatures and settings, as opposed to other cells that one tiny thing gets set off and they die instantly. HeLa cells were miraculously able to survive for long periods of time and were extremely resilient, so they wouldn't die super easily. They still needed to be kept in a sterile environment, of course, but as cells go, they were very strong, they were very resilient, and they multiplied very quickly. So the first doctor that took these cells, George Guy, realized this and went, oh, I can do a lot with these. I can give these cells to other people and they can do research as well. And we can create this environment where these cells are used for good. And of course, I'm not gonna say that his intentions were all good because he did steal these cells without consent, but at the root of it all, he just wanted to advance science so that we could have a better understanding of medicine and science as a whole. So compared to others in this story, he's not the worst character in the world, but I do want people to be aware that he still stole these cells and is now giving them away like they belong to him, which they don't really. Now, he gave these away for free, but then suddenly they started becoming monetized. People who got these cells passed them on to more people, and then some people were like, oh, I can make money off of these. So millions of dollars have been spent on the creation and the selling of HeLa cells, but Henrietta Lacks' family has seen none of it, and they can't go to court and settle something because not only do they not have the money for that, not only do they not have the education needed to fight for that, but to claim cells is a very difficult thing to do. There are a lot of legal barriers that just were so hard to be crossed that these people just didn't find the need to try. They felt hopeless in this situation, so they weren't able to get any money from it, even if they did try. And that is the problem, because there have been amazing advancements in science because of these cells, and the net good definitely outweighs the net bad, but then you have to remember, these cells were stolen, and this woman's family continued to be in poverty because Henrietta Lacks was not recognized for these cells. Obviously now, there are laws set in place to protect people from things like this, but it's just very upsetting that it happened. Henrietta Lacks was a black woman in the 1950s in the South. She was not treated as equal. She was treated as lesser in all degrees. No matter the reason why they didn't ask her for her cells, it doesn't matter. These cells continue to be used. And by now, it's an issue that is really hard to talk about because they're just something that people use in science. It's so widely used that people don't even question where the cells came from. But they all came back to this woman in the 50s who was not asked permission. They just stole her cells. And that is why this is such an ethically challenging book, because they did the wrong things for the right reason. And that's so frustrating because Henrietta Lacks has done so much for this world. but it was without her consent. It's just a really complicated issue. It's something that I debated quite a few times in school, but medical ethics have come a long way. But there's probably still things that need to change, of course, but medical ethics have come a long way, and they were not good back then. They were not good in the 1950s. So, who would I recommend this book to? Honestly, I would recommend this book to everyone. I think it's a good read, but it may not be for everyone. So, specifically, those who are into dark history, who are into medical history, those who are just into nonfiction in general, or medicine, anything like that. If you feel like you fit into one of these categories or a category like this that I haven't listed, that's awesome. I hope you have fun with it. But I am gonna end this video here. I really want to go eat dinner. I'm gonna go get Subway because I want a sandwich. But anyways, this has been Moo. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye bye! Rebecca Glute? Girl.